beautiful weather today. Wow, that's awesome. I turned on the camera and we have a European green woodpecker's call right away that we've heard in the last walk. And the bird I've talked about. Isn't that awesome? Wow. So yeah, that was a European green woodpecker, Picus viridis, beautifully calling from around the corner. Nice. And yeah, as I was saying, we have a beautiful weather. Green woodpecker can attest to that. Yeah, I mean, this normally, if it would be a normal winter, it would snow, but it's too warm, so yeah, it's raining and it's dark and it's quite warm, to be honest. At least there is no wind. That would be even worse. We had a buzzard flying out from there. Reiko, tady jdeme. Which is a bit of a red flag because that means there might be meat there. You know, so I'm extra cautious in regards to Drake so that he doesn't get himself in some sort of a in-trail feast or something like that. Yeah, usually when there's a buzzard, that means there might be a you know, either a dead animal or entrails or some meat, or because, you know, buzzards would not eat a bread dough, that's for sure, and they wouldn't eat grain either. So whenever there is a spot where there's a lot of buzzards and on top there are some ravens, well, that's a red flag, you know. I'm like, oh, there is definitely a dead animal somewhere. Hold on. Hear that beautiful song? I know it's, yeah, there it is. We actually got two different types of calls coming from the same bird. That one over there is a song. And that one over there, you can see the bird flying actually. It sounded like it was like a rattling sound. So that was a call and this is a song, but it's the same bird. Usually you're gonna hear the rattling sound, especially in the forest. And that is a classic call of a mistle thrush. Turdus viscivorus. And that over there is their song, you know. Very beautiful, very soft, very melancholic. Sounds very much like a call of a blackbird, Turdus merula. But it is much more simpler and minimalistic, much softer, I would say there's like more sadness to it, you know? It's like very sort of dreamy, like exactly like a sort of a voice or like a song coming out of a mist, you know? And it definitely, you know, like what is important in distinguishing and identifying songs and voices is always to take into account the habitat, you know, and for one, of course, the habitat, but also the situation, the timing, you know, all sorts of things are very important to take into account. So when you hear a song and you're trying to identify it, you know, you gotta look around, you gotta realize where's that song coming from, and so on and so forth. Of course, these are like kind of like next levels when you're like trying to, you know, learn bird songs. But it's important to remember, you know, that it's not just about the song, it's also about the habitat, and it's also about all sorts of different things that has to be taken into account. So that song is coming from a forest, and it's coming from all the way from the top of the trees. So it's very high up, and it's in the forest, you know, and that is a classic, I would say a classic spot for a mistle thrush to sing. You know, I'm not saying a blackbird couldn't sing from a forest from the very top, but it's definitely more unusual, you know, because blackbird is, well, it's a bird that is nowadays very common in city parks, you know, in like city environment, and it's a bird that very well adapted from a life from the forest to the life in the city greenery, you know. It used to be a very shy bird that lived only you know, in the forest, you know, in the wild. Nowadays it really is just like a magpie. It's a species that incredibly well adapted itself to life with humans. Now, mistle thrush is different, you know. Mistle thrush still is a species that is tied to forests and meadows where it forages. And if you hear a song, ooh, we got some animals, and those look like, again, don't have my glasses with me, those look like red deer does, because they were larger and had just like a different shape than roe deer does. So yeah, most likely red deer does. Two of them. There might be more. There's actually, usually there's much more, like 5, 6. But as I was saying, mistle thrush is, hold on, I'm gonna help Drake. There you go, buddy. Hold on. Mistle thrush is tied to forests and meadows where it forages, and if you hear a song like that coming from top of the trees in the forest, then it is very likely that there's very, very high probability that that is a mistle thrush. But if you listen closely to their songs, blackbird and mistle thrush, and compare them, there are a lot of differences, you know. The mistle thrush song is much more minimalistic, as I said. You know, it has less sort of motifs, you know, in the whole song. It still remains the same, and it repeats over and over. Whereas if you listen to a blackbird song, it is it's more, how to say, it's more artistic. There's like more motives, it's more up and down, it's more like sort of, it's more clean, so to speak, more clear, and it's, I think it's kind of faster, and the song itself is kind of like longer, I would say, you know. It just feels like a longer song. This is kind of like one motive, and it's being repeated over and over. And again, much softer, much more sort of melancholic and minimalistic, yes. And you know, if you listen and perhaps stay for a while, you might hear that maybe the bird's gonna fly away, and when they do, that's another chance to identify that bird, because usually they make some other call, like an alarm call or a flight call or a contact call, and that is totally different between blackbird and a mistle thrush. You know, mistle thrush is going to do that rattling sound, whereas blackbird is going to make this sort of panic sort of alarm call, you know, like a very familiar call. I'm sure you've heard it thousands of times, you know, especially in the city. Towards the dusk, when it's getting dark, you hear those voices all the time. So that's also when you can make your identification certain, is that like when you hear another call, which is totally different than the song. And a little bit more about mistle thrush. It's actually a bird that now it's mistle thrush's time, you know, because it's February and they start singing very early on, much early on than other birds, and way before spring. It's usually somewhere around February, at least in this region. And in Central Europe, that's the case. You know, they start singing in February, and that's one of the first like actual songs and sort of a concerts that you might hear from any bird, you know, in February, you know, because it's still very early for other birds. And of course, I mean, I've heard now we've heard some song over there, you know, like you hear sometimes you hear gray tit or blue tit or some other bird. But, you know, that usually is tied to like higher temperatures, and, you know, they kind of get activated through that, and they you know, they might get pumped up, like, you know, spring's coming, and so you might hear more birds in that case. And but like never, regardless really of the temperatures, I think, regardless of how cold it is, might be even snow, you might still, the song that you will hear in February is the mistle thrush. You know, it's just, that's the time when they start to sing and establish their territories, and it's something you can pretty much count on. You know, the other species do sing, but it's more like here and there, you know, and it's definitely not a rule, you know. It's for other species and other birds, it like the time when they start and when it's like a green light for them, that's definitely at some point in March, you know, again depending on the weather, but March is, at some point in March there is a starting point where it says, you know, now it's spring and let's go, you know, and every bird almost starts to sing, and you get these like morning dawn chorus thing, you know, when you wake up and there's like 30 different species singing at the same time, you know. So that's much later on, but yeah, mistle thrush wakes up much sooner, and he's like, now's the time, you know. And it's actually a great strategy, because when he starts to like when the male starts to sing, he's pretty much the only one in the whole forest, you know, who's singing. So in a way, when you think about it, that's pretty good strategy, you know, because he's going to be heard for sure. You know, he's not going to get you know, he's not going to get sort of over how to put it, he's not going to get muffled and suppressed by the other songs, you know. It's only going to be his song, you know. So I feel like that's pretty good strategy to start 1 month earlier. I'm not sure if he's doing it for that reason, you know, but, you know, that's the way mistle thrushes work. And the reason why it's called mistle thrush, and actually it's got it in its Latin name, Turdus viscivorus, is that actually that part viscivorus is that it eats mistle berries, you know, the whitish. Sometimes you find them on the ground, you know, like these little whitish, semi sort of translucent berries that are growing on mistles, on mistletoe. So they eat those, you know. And sometimes you find like something that looks like it actually looks like it's been thrown up, you know, and it looks like a little, like a weird sort of mash of kind of these berries with its seeds and so on and so forth. Speak of the devil, we've got some mistletoe here. It's completely cleaned off. Interesting. It's as if something ate it, actually. Look at that. It's like, yeah, definitely it's been chewed on. Wow. I don't know what is eating mistletoe, but maybe like roe deers, could they eat mistletoe? I guess. I didn't know, really. That's cool. Well, so they eat the berries, and sometimes you find these little, like as I said, like mashed sort of, how to put it, like little heaps of those, like seeds and the berries and all that, and that's actually from them, you know. So they eat it, and obviously they got to poop out the seeds too, you know. And that's actually how mistletoe gets propagated, you know. That's the interesting fact, is that mistle thrush is actually a propagator of mistletoes. So that bird eats the seeds, eats the berries with the seeds, and then it sits on the branch somewhere, you know. It poops out the seeds. They're very sticky, you know. Like, it's actually not sure if I'm saying this correctly, but there is there has been glue that has been made from the berries, you know, back in, I don't know when, you know, a couple centuries back probably. They were making glue out of those berries, if I'm not mistaken. Again, let me correct myself in the subtitles as usual, but that's what I remember. So it's very sticky, and the reason why it's sticky, so that it sticks the seeds to the branch. So mistletoe poops out the seed sticks to the branch, and in, I don't know how long it takes for the seeds to germinate, but at some point it germinates. It grows its roots through the bark of the tree, and the rest is history, you know. You get mistletoe growing, and that's how it gets done. And so if you see a forest, you know, where there's a lot of trees with a lot of mistletoes, you know who's the culprit. And you know that you can expect a mistletoe too, but mistle thrush somewhere, you know. Also mistle thrush, you can find him foraging in like larger sort of groups, in larger flocks on meadows. They really like, either you're gonna hear them sing from very high, from up very high from the top of the tree, from the top of the trees, or you're gonna see them very often on meadows, on pastures, when they forage in. It doesn't have to be groups, really. I mean, it could be just one mistle thrush, but very often there's like a flock, and they forage there. They, you know, jump around on the ground. They forage, which is a very different behavior from, for instance, their relatives, other thrushes like song thrush, or I don't know, redwing, or, you know. So and usually people tend to get confused whether if they see a thrush, whether it's a mistle thrush or a song thrush. But this is a very specific behavior. So if you see a group of birds, you know, a flock on the meadow, on the pasture, you know, and they're you know, larger birds with yeah, he would like to play, right? No tam máme nějak klasíček, potom dál máme. No, no ano. Yeah. You know, that's the thing. I would love to play with Drake. I used to play with him a lot, but he was diagnosed with terminal arthritis, you know, like a really bad case of arthritis. And I mean, I don't know what to do, you know, because he shouldn't be really straining that leg too much. And his, like his playing style is very, very unfriendly with like a knee with terminal arthritis, unfortunately. So I don't know what to do. How do you play with such a dog? See what he's doing? It's like running and changing directions, you know. It's like putting a lot of strain on that knee, you know. So I'm like, Drake, you should be resting, but no, he wants to play. He wants to play. Yeah, it kind of makes me sad because I want to play with him, you know. I don't want to be, you know, a party pooper, but I also want him to be healthy. So it's kind of like, you know, it's yeah, it's no, it's a, you know, contradictory sort of situation for me, you know. I want to play with him, but I don't want to put a strain on his knee too. So yeah, anyways, that was a little bit of a yeah, I digressed a little bit, but yeah, that's a majorly different behavior from a song thrush, because song thrush is usually a very individualistic bird, you know, and of course you can find them in flocks at some point, you know, when they're migrating and so on and so forth, but not very common sight, definitely not. But mistle thrush, definitely, you're gonna see groups of them on pastures and meadows when they forage. They're also larger than song thrushes, definitely much larger. And the good part is that they like to do their rattling call. You know, the rattling call is absolutely unmistakable call that you're gonna hear when you spook them out, when they're gonna, you know, take off from that meadow or pasture. They're gonna do that rattling sound, at least one of them, and that's when you know, oh yeah, that's a mistle thrush. So yeah, that was an interesting encounter I didn't expect. That's the thing. I always think, like, you know, I don't think I'm going to talk about anything today. I just want to walk, and it's going to be, you know, a silent sort of, yeah, a silent journey through the forest. But something happens every single time, you know, and that's great. Having fun with it, really. So who knows what we're going to see next time or hear. All right, I'm signing off.